Good afternoon. My name is Gregg Wallace. I'm a startup advisor here in San Francisco. I'm glad to welcome the audience from Canada, from the United States, and beyond to this afternoon's panel on curating the right tech stack for your business. First of all, just a quick thank you to the organizers, to Jerry and Tom and the whole team at CanBIM for putting on this day. I joined since early this morning at 5:30. We heard from Procore. We heard from several other startups throughout the day. We also heard the perspective of some investors as well as some early stage incubators. And for this next session, I'm going to be delighted to welcome three speakers who work for leading companies, one from a construction company, one from an insurance risk broker, largest in the world for construction, and one from a very large property management firm. So I'd like to go ahead and invite my panelists to join in and let me know if you can see everybody. There's David, Nick, and we'll have Thano here in a second. So maybe just to set the stage, this section is on creating the right tech stack. Involve working with both mature sets of technologies and technology providers that are very big names and corporations, but it's also going to work on looking into and exploring the frontier. So moving the needle forward. And as members of leading companies, we know that the sector is looking to your companies to kind of lead the way on bringing new technologies, both number one, into your company, number two, into the building itself, building new technologies into buildings. And then number three, providing technologies that help your company interface with all of its partners, because you have a huge number of suppliers who are counting on your technologies and your company. So I'd just like that, keep that in mind as we go through today. Also, I think across the audience, we have a number of people who are investors, who are startups, who are general contractors, owners of small businesses. And they may be thinking through, what do they need to do to add resources and team members to look at and explore new technologies? Should they be building tools internally, or should they be strictly looking to source external technologies? And I think all three of our speakers today have spent a lot of time thinking through these type of questions of, do we build it here or do we buy it? How do we build things into the tech stack? Probably have IT teams who are overwhelmed by the number of new ideas that you're bringing forth with your teams every year. And you have operations teams who say, look, we're happy to innovate and try new things, but we also have accountability to get the job done. So kind of balancing the need for continued operations with the need for regularly trying, testing, and deploying new technologies. So I think I'm personally very excited to continue the conversations. We got things kicked off with a pre-call last week. So I will pause here and invite David to go ahead and kick us off. Let's hear a little bit about you. Let's hear a bit about your company, your team, and what you're focusing on in 2020. Then we'll make the rounds.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Really happy to be here. Thank you to Jerry and Gary and the CanBIM team. From my end, I'm David Bowcott. I run growth, innovation, and insight for our global construction and infrastructure practice here at Aon. Aon is, as Greg mentioned, once we acquire Wallace, the largest broker in the world, and I think in the construction space, we probably have 3 times the amount of construction on an annual basis. From my end, basically what I do is I help clients, firm contractors and owners find risk controls and risk finance solutions to help them ultimately minimize the risk on their projects and to get back on their feet when things do go wrong, both in the construction phase and into the operations phase. And really, in the past 7 years, I've focused heavily in the technology space. So I'm going to talk a bit more about what we've done in that area, but basically in the technology space, we're looking for technologies that are preventing or mitigating risk. Some of the risks that we see in the data we collect, the insurance industry can be boring, but we do collect a lot of failure data and things going wrong. So ultimately we use that data to really try and identify which technologies are having the greatest impact and hopefully pass that information on to our clients. So that's really how I fit into this space. So that's enough about me.
Great. We'll continue with Nick, dialing in from Denver today.
Hi, my name is Nick Kurth. I work for PCL Construction, a large general contractor based out of Edmonton, Alberta. We also have offices in the United States. I'm based out of our Denver office. I work for a group called Integrated Construction Services, and this was a team that was put together about 2 to 3 years ago to try and find synergy between different services within the company, from pre-construction, quality, estimating, scheduling. I head up the technology side of that for the organization, which includes heavily the VDC side as well as other integrated technologies. But we're really focused on how do we help this digital transformation within our entire organization and in all of these different pockets of our company, literally from pre-con all the way through turnover. We are always looking to try and figure out how we can drive value to our clients through these types of innovations and technologies, and how do we help manage risk on site and hopefully improve productivities, drive schedule improvements, all of this kind of stuff.
Excellent. And next, let's go west, north up to Vancouver. Thano Lambrinos leads innovation, QuadReal, one of the largest property asset managers of Canada. So Thano, over to you.
Thanks, guys. Once again, thanks, Jerry and Tom and the CAMBIM team for inviting me to be on this panel. My name is Thano Lambrinos. I am the Vice President of Digital Innovation and Smart Building Technology at QuadReal Property Group. We are a developer, asset manager, operations, real estate company, managing just over $44 billion worth of assets. That includes office, retail, residential, and industrial. Domestically in Canada, that equates to around 40 million square feet of commercial space and around 10,000 residential units. Internationally, throughout the US and Europe and Asia, there's another 80 million or so, 79 million square feet of commercial space, around 35,000 residential suites, a number of student housing suites, and growing every day, data center space, and some alternatives as well. So a very large manager, vertically integrated in Canada, where we develop and operate the properties. My role is to help the business realize a set of very high value use cases, whether operational efficiency, sustainability and energy optimization, experiential use cases for tenants and residents of our buildings, all underpinned by advanced technology. So we've identified and have set a series of use cases that we feel brings value to the business, and are delivering those use cases underpinned by technology to our income producing properties, or our IPP portfolio. And I'm also heavily involved in our development portfolio as well. I'm one of you. I came from the sub-trades. I worked for a mechanical and electrical firm for many years. I worked for a very large general contractor that competes with PCL in Canada. There's really only two big ones, PCL and Ellis Don. So I was at the other one. Started their digital services group over there, and then jumped over to the owner side. So I've seen it from both sides, and I hopefully can bring a unique perspective. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
Excellent. Thano, I want to actually pull the thread right there, since that you had seen both sides of this perspective. The GCs are often always saying, well, we'll adopt that technology. Maybe it's digital twin. We'll adopt the technology, but it depends what the owner's willing to pay for, where you can get reimbursement with those tight margins. So now that you're on the owner side, what's the owner pull? Kind of where are we at currently in 2020? I had a quick look at the website. There's some discussion around healthier buildings and helping. Obviously, that's a short-term concern, but it's a longer-term concern as well, about sustainability and health and enjoyment of the experience for the tenants. But what does that tangibly mean? What are the owners wanting to see more of in the projects that are turned over?
Yeah, so obviously COVID, you can't have one of these panels without talking about COVID. It's quite literally impossible. But what COVID did, however, is accelerate a number of trends in the built environments that were already moving anyway. Things like understanding real-time occupancy and knowing where people were moving in and out of the space. Things like indoor environmental quality and advanced filtration. Things like digital communication tools for the tenants and things of that nature. And to speak to the idea of digital twin, having the ability to remotely access your buildings when you can't be there and have the same understanding of what's going on and be able to adjust and command and control from a remote location. So all of these things were already happening, and COVID accelerated it. As it pertains to how we incorporate this into the construction cycle, I would say it's easy, but it's really not. We're disrupting a 50, 100-year-old supply chain that was very used to doing things in a very specific way that we are now, because of technology, asking to be broken up. And I think the fundamental problem is in the industry, there's so many silos and so many disconnects that the technology conversation often happens far too late in the cycle. And by that time, it's extremely expensive to make major changes to the way that you are bringing your asset to life. And therefore, advanced technologies in the built environment have often been painted with this brush that it's too expensive, it's tough to equate to a value proposition, and a lot of it gets dropped even today. So what we've tried to do, and what I would encourage anyone in the audience who's part of a GC or part of that supply chain to do, is introduce technology early. And that means affecting the design. It means affecting the mechanical and electrical specifications. It means affecting security specifications and various other building systems early. And the other thing that we're doing that makes me not too popular at the subcontractor parties anymore is breaking up scope that was typically existed and was owned by certain subcontractors for so long, so that we as owners can now get closer to the technology, make selections early, and ensure that they're effectively and appropriately deployed throughout the construction process. And if you do that, the actual delta of from a cost perspective of a quote unquote smart building versus a traditional building isn't that much, and the value is significant, whether quantifiable through real ROI and cost savings through the operational phase, or softer through things like tenant experience. So there's a lot that the audience and us as a community needs to do through the construction cycle. But us as owners, we want to be able to deliver experiences. We want to be able to deliver these efficiencies. And COVID has been a massive accelerant. So it's up to us and fellas like Nick and PCL who we work with, and all the other contractors who we work with, to really change the way that we're bringing these assets to bear, so that we can effectively incorporate technologies to drive these outcomes in these use cases.
Excellent. I'm going to hand it over to Nick. Nick, amongst the portfolio of activities that your team is planning on and even thinking towards 2021, kind of how many of those activities are driven by these shifting owner needs versus what you need for operational efficiency amongst your own team, and technologies that the owner may not see?
Right. I mean, I can't agree with Thano more, with getting input and collaboration on what's going to go into these buildings early on is going to set the stage for how we are able to leverage technology throughout the life cycle of the project. And, the earlier you get in, the more cost effective it always is. And like anything for our very sophisticated clients, it's driving a lot of what we do and how we do it. I mean, we've got an incredibly talented group of folks up in Edmonton, Alberta, who are, laser focused on IoT and smart buildings, and how do we, bring this type of technology to better manage projects for our clients, help them, manage that risk, how do we better manage risk on these projects? But then, think of it as a life cycle solution, potentially something that if we use it during construction, it can live on and it can add value to the client, well beyond just the initial investment of the asset, because I think we've all generally have seen or understand that the costs of these assets don't start and end with the building of the asset itself. So, our executive team has a vision for what IoT is going to do for smart buildings and what smart buildings are going to do for smart cities. And I think, whether you're on the client side, the design side, the contractor side, everybody has to start thinking of it in terms of, I'm not going to wait for these other things to fall into place exactly to start pushing and to start driving this kind of innovation, because if it's a client driving it, that's phenomenal. That's exactly what we're all looking for, right? But if they're not, if you're the GC or you're the design team, helping them understand how this is going to impact them, help them. If the GC doesn't quite see it, and you're the design team and you see what the value can be, you need to bring them on board. If you're the GC, it's a push and pull for sure. I think that the entire industry and everybody, all the stakeholders on a project, we just can't wait around. If we wait, we'll be in a continuous, in continual stasis, waiting for somebody else to make the move, and coming up with reasons why not to, So, and luckily right now we are seeing this from our clients more than ever, that they are interested in digital twins. They're interested in smart buildings and, healthy buildings, like you said, Greg, things like that are driving everything from sustainability, mass timber type projects to, really advanced technology being implemented into the operating systems of the facility itself.
Mm-hmm. And Nick, you mentioned IoT, which is can be a little bit buzzwordy. If we have people in the audience saying, "Okay, all right, let's be really, really specific." PCL is building out a job site insights group, and even potentially licensing that. Can you just give maybe 2 or 3 very specific use cases or examples of what exactly that
Absolutely.
means?
So
Sensors put into place.
The vision really is around leveraging the Internet of Things, connectivity amongst everything, sensors specifically in this case, and partnering with other companies that do similar type work to better monitor on-site activities for construction. Nothing sets a project back worse than burst pipes, flooding, things like that. Understanding where these types of potential risk lie, implementing tools that would help mitigate that risk. It monitors everything from heat and humidity to, we've partnered with Eddy Solutions for flood control to be able to shut off valves and not experience some of the unfortunate things that can and often do happen on construction sites. And it's a platform, so it's not intended to just be this one thing that's given to somebody and it's that and only that. It's intended to expand and grow and help, help construction take some steps forward, I guess, in this space, but then also be prepared for. It's also prepped for client use as well, post-construction.
Mm-hmm. And now, David, if I hear of IoT monitoring risks, it sounds like a clear territory for Aon and business development that I know you put together as well, right? So traditionally looking at projects and companies at their given risk level, you're now able to zoom in on specific sets of activity, even specific days of work. Where is this heading, and how is Aon helping some of those technologies reach further levels of subcontractors as well?
Yeah, as I mentioned, Greg, about 7 years ago, we realized that the technology growth was exponential. Like obviously Moore's law, to some degree makes it exponential. And so a lot of our clients were saying there's so many things out there coming to the marketplace. Of course, there was always the big platforms, the Autodesk and Procore and the Trimble team with Viewpoint. Those are great, and it's a lot of human beings entering information in to give everybody a sense of where everything is, accounting and RFIs and defects. But when we set up our technology assessment panel around 4 years ago to really dig into what's out there, a lot of point solutions started coming to the surface. Obviously the venture capital community in North America is the best in the world, and so there's a lot of small companies that were coming to the surface. So we set up this tech assessment panel, bringing in our actuaries that are construction focused, bringing in our brokers within our firm, bringing in our risk engineers and risk control experts, and of course, using the data that we have around where all the losses are coming from. And so we specifically went on a hunt to find, okay, water damage is a big risk. Okay, worker injury in the United States in particular is a big risk. Defective workmanship in many ways is a big risk. Design errors, big risk. So we went out there looking specifically to match these risks or these problems to solutions. So we would bring in the firms, sit down for an hour and a half, talk about what they're doing. Our team would fire questions at them, and the ones that we thought were viable, we would actually give some visibility to our clients. And over time, we actually started giving visibility to our insurers and saying, "Hey, you should have a look at this." And I think ultimately, I think where it's heading is the predictive job site and the predictive asset, right? I think these assets are coming to life, and from an insurance standpoint, that's a really good thing, because if the asset can actually tell you it's got like a hangnail before you have to chop its arm off, right? I think it's going to save the whole arm. And of course, when that happens, the contractor pays for part of the arm, the owner pays for part of the arm, and the insurance companies pay for a lot of the arm, depending if it's a covered risk. So you can kind of see where it's going. And I think really what's going to happen in the insurance sector is there's going to be a change in the way that insurance is underwritten, which traditionally it's been underwritten on the basis of data of the past. And now we got data of the present, and we got even data of the future, like predictive analytics. So it's a long journey, and I'm just happy to see companies like PCL and Thano and his team at QuadReal going down this road, because I think it's really exciting, and it's going to have a material impact on risk. And if we're paying, in the insurance industry, paying less in claims, we can expand cover. We can start looking at insuring other risks, which could actually push innovation much further. So that's kind of a lot to take in, but that's kind of where we see things going.
Mm-hmm. And now, David, ahead of the call, I was scrolling through, and this Tech Corner Aon list has 42 startups there, and I can imagine there's probably a few behind the scenes. What do startups need to think about if they're approaching Aon, and how do they get listed there? Kind of what's the requirements, and then a thorny question down the line of who's going to own the data, right? Is it and how does that affect our other partners here? Yep.
It's my building.
That's true. I just a point on that. It's actually a really good point, is who owns the data, and is the customer consuming it all? It's funny, you start going down the supply chain. We started talking about different elements of the supply chain, and maybe if you ask PCL, they probably, well, you know what, it's kind of our data, it's our platform, it's our data. But as you start going down the line, well, it's or maybe it's the subcontractor data, or maybe it's the actual sensor manufacturer data. But really, very, very biasedly, and we actually very aggressively want to own that data, because there's tremendous value in it for us, and the way that we can potentially leverage it to run our business. And it's funny, Dave, that you mentioned leak detection, because our premiums just skyrocketed because of water. Water is the new fire. So we are chasing anything that we can from a leak detection perspective that can help us mitigate that risk. But yeah, the data is the biggest, is certainly the biggest piece of it. And you want to own it, you want to be able to leverage it, but you also don't want to be on a data island. You want to be able to amalgamate that data with other folks, with other customers, to get the value of it in aggregate. So it's certainly an interesting conversation.
I tell you, without a doubt, I think there's data that is going to help you be more competitive and be a differentiating entity. No doubt about it. But at the same time, I think most of us see an era of collaboration in the economy, and I think data is one of the places where we could really get some amazing win-win-win situations, amongst all the stakeholders. So, and really, the data that we're interested in is the data related to risk, because you know what, the insurance sector pays out a lot of that, the cost of when those risks manifest. And we're not looking to start a construction company or become a real estate owner from the insurance standpoint. But if we can help everybody better manage the risk, that's a great day for us. So I think everybody's got to kind of put their swords down when we talk about who's going to own the data, and we got to really sit and think, okay, is this person really going to start something up, to compete with me? They might. We've seen amazing, disruptions due to technology. But I think it's I'm starting to see data alliances form. There's one we're involved in down in the United States, which is there's about 12 contractors that are sharing safety data. Because safety, hey, we can all agree on one thing. Let's share data to prevent people getting hurt. That seems like a pretty, good reason to share data. But sure, there's certain areas where we may not see data alliances. Like some of the secret sauce that the design and the construction firms are using to get things done efficiently. But it's going to be a fascinating road.
And David, is that the PASC that Josh Canner set up, the PASC.ai? Okay.
Yeah, Predictive Analytics Strategic Council. And I think, and I'm actually hosting a panel, going to take your role in a panel in about a month. And it's about 4 or 5 different data alliances from different parts of the world, right? So there's one for TradeLens for all the cargo industry. I've got the PASC folks, so I've got Josh on there. I've also got the Transit System Data Alliance that's actually out of the UK. They do 150 of the world's metros. I mean, that's pretty fascinating. I mean, I'm riding the metros these days, and they're still as bad. So I'm not sure what they're doing with the data. But ultimately, it would be great if one day everything's working perfectly because of that data.
But getting data from a site also requires getting sensors in place. And one of the conversations I've had with startups the most over the past 2 years is, how do you get physical devices, whether they're cameras, IoT sensors, walking robots? Things are going to break down. And the first time the team looks at it, they're going to say, that's not ready for a construction site. Are you serious? And so maybe back over to you, Nick. I mean, as you're meeting teams that say, hey, look, I've got a widget that can sense this. Oh, and I guarantee it has 100% uptime to get the data up to the cloud so that Thano and David's teams can see and screen the data and analyze it. Kind of, Nick, how do you think about pressuring startups, or are they doing well to be ready for the job site, or are they halfway ready? Kind of, do you see a mix?
Yeah, I mean, I see it mixed. I see those that are, there are lots of folks out there that are almost fresh off a job site, had an idea, decided to go solve a problem, and there's a startup, and frankly, their solutions are oftentimes very real because they're bringing that sense of what is practical on a project site. I mean, it's sort of like you kind of have to be smart about it. You have to also know the market that you're in, the folks that you're dealing with. I mean, that has everything to do with it. I mean, it's definitely would be disingenuous to say like all markets are exactly as progressive as all other markets, just the individuals, the clients, trade contractors. There's the whole infrastructure there that changes region to region and that kind of thing. And I mean, when we've done it, there's been, I mean, when we think about the sensor specifically, to your point, I mean, we went through a lot of trial and error testing, evaluation. You've got those folks that are early adopters, and you've got everybody from late adopters and in between. And you just kind of hit the folks that are really going to kick the tires on something new and understand that, hey, this isn't going to be perfect the first time. And you're going to be not necessarily the guinea pig, but we'll say that you're tip of the spear with innovation and adoption. And that piques some people's interest, and they want to be, and they're willing to put in that effort. And that's how we approach it. I mean, we've got a lot of corporate infrastructure as well around innovation. So there's a lot of evaluation that goes into, and a lot of sort of rigor, I guess I would say, around, okay, is this something that's practical? Have we done our due diligence to run this by some superintendents and foremen and the folks that this might impact, project managers, because cost plays a lot into that, as well as functionality and uptime.
Because your operations team isn't going to have patience to exhaust a tremendous amount of time going back again and again to restart or reboot or get uptime from something that's not reporting.
Ideally, it's saving them more time or money or headache than it's costing, right? Is the entire intent there. So we try not to just at random roll things out to our operations teams.
Okay.
We do the due diligence corporately, and then I mean, things do get rolled out though. You've got to start to test it in real world environments to get the critical feedback that you need, and I mean, when we look at companies that we're going to work with, it's those folks that are, when they're talking to us, saying, we want your feedback. We are agile and ready to make changes that you need made in order to make our product something that you can actually use. Those are the folks that we're looking, to partner with and work with.
Okay. I'd like to dig in more on a slightly technical topic of big data. And certainly it's familiar with any of the IT teams out there. For non-technical people like me, I think of it as, at the end of the day, it's a warehouse logistics. Which data pools are you storing in which areas of the warehouse, and are those accessible when you've got to pull them off the shelf and run analytics? I'd like to know, maybe starting with Thano, I mean, do each of your companies have a big data group that are doing analytics? First part of the question. And then second part, for smaller companies in the ecosystem, kind of, are there partners out there who can help and support and kind of, do you know any of those partners that can support with that?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have a data group focused on the enterprise, but I think one of the big challenges in the built environment is getting the data. So in a lot of our either existing buildings or even our new projects, there's a lot of silos, a lot of data silos. And one of our biggest challenges is when, I'll take a step back, when I worked with my team on building our digital strategy for the company, for the built environment, there's kind of very systematic and pragmatic steps that you need to take in order to access this information. The first is having ubiquitous connectivity through your buildings and through the sites. At a new job site is obviously always a challenge, and even in an existing building or a new building can be an issue too. So planning for that ubiquitous connectivity and connecting multiple sources of data, whether they're building automation systems or security camera-based systems or access control systems or various IoT devices like we were talking about, leak sensors, occupancy sensors, environmental air quality sensors, things of that nature. On a single connectivity stream is problem number one. Problem number two is, you described this example of a warehouse. The problem with a lot of these data silos is, in a warehouse environment, a piece of data from one section may only be valuable or relevant when cross-referenced from a piece of data from another section. So being able to integrate these various data sources is a critical component to our built environment strategy. So building these integration platforms, working with partners, there's several of them. Digital twins is a term that's used a lot, although if you ask 5 different people, you'll get 10 different definitions of what a digital twin actually is. But really getting data from multiple sources and integrating those pieces of data in time series so that we can actually understand what's going on at a point in time from multiple different pieces of equipment, multiple different sensors. And then once you've managed to solve that integration problem, which most people haven't, and I won't try to project like we have. We're definitely down the road on a lot of fronts, but then it's layering analytics over those multiple sources of data. So there are, before we start talking about big data and a lot of these kind of buzzwords that get everybody excited, and then when you peel back the layers of the onion, you realize that there's not much beneath, especially in the built environment, because we are so archaic in the way that we, for the construction industry, which I spent a lot of time in real estate, the way the buildings have been managed have been the same way for the last 30, 40 years, and they're starting to rapidly change, but it's taken a while. So it's really about connectivity, integrating data sources, and now layering over analytics, which is really your roadmap. And I would venture to say we're a big firm and have put a lot of stock into the value of this. And we're not just getting started, but we're certainly not there yet.
And David, this must be the wheelhouse of Aon, right? This is you live and die by your data analytics team ability to crunch numbers.
Well, the original data scientists were all actuaries, right? So I think they just changed their title. We obviously spend I'd say close to $1 billion on data. That's a lot of money, and I can tell you we're not saying we have the answers either. I think Thano's point is the key. I mean, we're all in the early stages. We're in the sandbox stage. It's like in the 70s when there was these the personal computer things where they're like just messing around with personal computers, imagining what they could look like, and then eventually you saw Apple and it was like, that's what we want, more of that. And so it just exploded. I think we're still in that very early stage with respect to IoT, other sources of data, and coming up with data strategies to really get to that predictive or prescriptive asset. And I think it's fun. You can see the things are popping up, and you're going, "Whoa, we're almost there." It's happening. So it's really exciting. So yeah, we spend a lot of money, but clearly we're trying to make sure that the bets capital make are well founded on a good foundation of risk controls, so that they don't lose their shirts. I mean, there's a lot of things that insurance is going to lose their shirts on in the coming decade or 2 decades. Low-lying areas with flood potential. They may not get insurance anymore. So we got to try to figure out ways to make sure that there's capital there so insurance exists. And if insurance doesn't exist, I can bet you investors and financiers are going to say, no way, I'm not doing this deal because there's no insurance. And I think, so my role is kind of using technology to make sure insurance sticks around a little bit longer with all the catastrophic events that appear to be on the horizon.
So this will still be there's a message there to stay tuned, because it's still a junior stage of getting the data in place before we can start to make fireworks with it. So what if there comes, and there certainly are teams that are working to bring pieces of the data together. We see a lot of construction project management platforms creating APIs so that they plug in together with a lot of the startups and then thus bring the data together. As there are new teams and platforms and technologies, which probably you can't shift out every year, how do your companies go about purchasing decisions? I'm sure there are hundreds of salespeople who would love to reach out by email, educate you about their solution. Kind of how does purchasing work at your companies? Maybe Nick, we'll start with PCL and go around.
Sure. I mean, lots of different entities within the organization, lots of different technology coming our direction. And so, I mean, we have a pretty organized committee scenario of folks that sort of cross represent operations, finance, business technology, all of these different groups that are stakeholders. We take on a number of basically what we say proof of concept type projects every year. We have a strategic plan on what we're trying to do for that year. The folks in the tech that comes our direction, that aligns with our strategic plan, gets our attention. We go about evaluating those tools as they relate to what we're trying to achieve. And then, and then again, that's all about stakeholders. It's all about getting the folks that are going to be using it and the folks, not just the folks that are using it at the ground level, but then also your business technology individuals who are going to be managing that data, that big data, in your data lake, so that we can better, we can leverage it for analytics downstream and that kind of thing. It's about getting these teams together to just kind of methodically go through and evaluate it, and what comes out the other end then makes its way up to, depending on how it comes out, makes its way up to the committees that then make decisions on, enterprise type solutions, ones that are going to kind of impact PCL as a whole, rather than, maybe one type of project or something like that. We do have these nearly bespoke kind of solutions that we will purchase because we have a project, and if it's going to make us better and enhance client experience, project delivery, et cetera, we're going to go down that path as well. But big decisions get pushed upstream to this from sort of a ground, the strategic plan, the direction we're going to head is an executive level kind of initiative. The POC and evaluation is sort of grassroots. And then the middle tier of the management group that makes those decisions will, are part of the grassroots, are part of the executive committee. I mean, it's kind of everybody at that stage then sitting down and making the decision on how to move forward.
Thano, how about it, QuadReal?
Yeah, I mean, that, I guess, like it was very well thought out, and it's the exact same thing that we're doing. You develop a strategic plan for the year, and obviously it changes because technology changes so quickly. So you have to be super nimble, and pandemics happen, apparently, and that makes everything change too. So yeah, it's really about identifying what your business drivers are and what the outcomes you're chasing are, and identifying from there what technologies that come to you either through the typical sales channel or that you're hunting out for to solve a specific problem. And then identifying if they work for you. So we've actually just started what we're calling our digital building pilot program, where very similarly to Nick, we've got folks like myself who are responsible for innovation at the company in the built environment, people from the site teams, people from the development, construction side, people from all different kind of stakeholder groups as part of it. And identifying, whether there's a challenge that comes from the field, an issue that comes from the business, they don't know how to solve it. We'll help them try to source a technology and run a skunkworks type project, a very agile approach to identify if it works or not. Or they come to us with a technology to solve a problem, at which point we'll help them come up with a process and be able to effectively innovate very iteratively and see if this POC or this pilot works, and then identify if we need a larger scale pilot to validate what we originally saw, or we're ready for company-wide rollout. So yeah, quite similarly, we look at the strategic plan. What are we trying to accomplish? But sometimes stuff comes out of left field, and technology. Usually, the strategic plan drives the technology selections, but sometimes something in technology happens that's so groundbreaking that affects your strategic plan. So you have to be very, very, very agile, very nimble to be able to respond to these things, which we happen to luckily be able to be in, even though we're a very large pension fund owned company. We've made a strategic decision that the typical bureaucracy that exists in a lot of our competitors, frankly, companies, we can't have if we want to be able to stay ahead of the pack. So yeah, I'm pretty well aligned with Nick on the way that we purchased.
I mean, and Greg, I could just add just a bit. Obviously, we're not buying the technology. We're looking at our clients to put the technologies in place. But we are trying to educate the insurance companies that we broker deals to about the different technologies. And remember, insurance actually can be, in a construction phase, can be sometimes, 2 to as much as 15% of the construction value. If you're working in New York State, you've seen some pretty big insurance. Yeah, so there's a lot of money there that, currently some of those lines of cover are running at 100% losses. So, if you can find a technology that can mitigate water by 90%, then obviously, and 60% of those losses are water. Well, I'm sure that we can get insurers to start paying for this stuff. But when I look at my clients, I'm always thinking that question. Okay, purchasing. What are you going to do? What are you deciding to purchase and not purchase? And I think the key point is look at your losses. Look at where you're suffering pain. Go to your key performance indicators. I would suggest insurance losses is probably one of the great ones, right? But also incidents, tracking your incidents. Basically finding out where you're failing. RFIs, all these different things tell you a story, and then you can quantify what the biggest risks are your organization are facing in construction and in operations of the asset. And ultimately, that's your roadmap. And you start looking for solutions around those big risks. And it's funny because all these point solutions kept popping up. I was going, oh, that's great for this risk. It's partly great for this risk. And that's why when I look at what PCL's put together with Job Site Insights, it's an IoT backbone. They've got a sandbox. And so the sandbox now is they can put ornaments on the tree and they can say, oh, is that the best Christmas tree? No, that's not. And they can eventually find the best Christmas tree for each asset. I mean, maybe that's a crappy analogy, but Christmas is coming. So
that's a good one.
Ultimately, I think that's a great play. That makes total sense. And use the data though to figure out what ornaments you want to put on there, so you at least have a fighting chance to be successful out of the gate.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good analogy, and it's true that we've based our entire technology strategy on a approach of microservices, right? Talking about other analogies, bad or otherwise. The one that I like to use that I stole, I didn't come up with this at all, is you don't go to a buffet to get a good steak, right? So you're not going to go. There's a lot of big technology companies and a lot of big firms that can claim to have a lot of the answers that you need that probably don't, or do it not as well as some of these bespoke firms can and some of these bespoke startups can. So it's really about understanding what your architecture and infrastructure looks like, so that you can plug in and remove these different, whether it's IoT technology, software, whatever problem you're looking to solve, and create an architecture that allows for easy integration, but loose coupling, if you will, to ensure that you can plug in and pull out things on the fly, identify if they have value, and if they do, incorporate them into your stack. So yeah, I actually admire PCL's approach from that perspective, certainly.
So I have a last question, and in the meantime, I'd also like to invite our audience to feel free to pop into the Q&A and post any question there that you'd like answered in the 10 minutes we have remaining here. Just for the final question, each of your three companies works with a lot of small businesses who are your partners, and a lot of these small businesses cannot afford to hire a CIO out of Microsoft or a CIO out of other big tech companies. Are there any best practices that you've seen from some of your smaller clients with regards to policies or principles that they're setting up as they're also scouting and working on building out their own tech capabilities? Anybody can kick us off.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's scale matters, right? The size of the company matters, because then you've got the margins to invest in R&D, and it is tough for the small, medium-sized entities to afford to do that. But I would say though, it's taking part in associations like CAMBIM, or going to Built World, or going to ENR Future Tech. I mean, we're not talking a truckload of money, and then just finding partners that may not charge you for advice, right? But they have a lot of information around the technology that's out there, and I think it's tough. It's a really tough spot, and I think that's why you see what happened in manufacturing happen, because the larger companies had the money to invest in R&D, and then there's a bunch of large manufacturers, and there's not too many mom and pop shops anymore. And I think this is that path. It's just now happening in construction.
Yeah, and if I can give one piece of advice to the startups, and I know it's difficult, but don't try to hit a home run with every building from a cost perspective, because as a real estate owner manager, when we have solutions and startups that come, whether through construction or through operations, and want an amount of money per square foot, and they deliver one feature set, and then another company wants an amount of money per square foot, and quickly you come to a cost base that's not sustainable. And it's because a lot of these startups want to get a couple big buildings, pump their valuation so that they can get a big funding round, and probably everyone wants to be a unicorn. But I think the way of doing that is building a scalable technology solution, whatever that solution may be, and coming up with a scalable cost and economic cost model. Because I think that is where a lot of these startups and new technologies companies fall apart, is they come to us with a solution that at scale just economically doesn't make sense. Maybe for a small building here and there, but even the one that I'm sitting in right now, that's combined over almost a couple of million square feet with the towers that we have on the site. A lot of these tech solutions, don't add up, and they come with dollar signs in their eyes and think that this is going to be their big home run, and that's not the way to look at it. You have to look at the long term, not just a couple of quick wins to get a valuation, make a bunch of cash, and get out. So I think that, long-term vision with some of these startups, although it can be difficult, and I know a lot of startup founders that are, scraping together pennies to try to get things going sometimes, and I do feel for them, but unfortunately, I'm not going to fund and pay for your growth. I will to an extent, but not the way that a lot of them are looking for it.
I'd like to agree wholeheartedly with Thano on that. It does add up. Like you said, these, you come in with the 1-point solution and it's amazing, but we have hundreds of things that need to get done on a construction site. And if we have to pay that kind of money for every single thing, just understand where we're coming from too. Like from my perspective as a contractor, our risk is high. The margins are not, they're not huge. And so we're needing to manage that in a really effective way. And just because one thing is going to make people on our job site maybe more productive and save them time, it doesn't necessarily mean our general conditions and our cost of managing the project actually goes down. What ends up happening oftentimes is that is just one more thing to now pay for that wasn't potentially initially in the budget or not in the project team's mind either. We're not implementing a digital timekeeping card and pulling somebody off of our staff. We still are trucking along with the right amount of people. Buildings are more complex. All this, there's lots of reasons I think that it's happening, but it's not a one-to-one exactly the way that I think people might think it is when they're thinking what the value of the tool or the solution might be.
So maybe just to close us off, there's a famous Bill Gates quote about all of us overestimating the amount of change that happens in the next 2 years, and then underestimating the degree and magnitude of change possible in the next 10. Kind of as we think forward the next 5 to 10 years, each of you have your ears to the ground and you're looking at all sorts of technology. Maybe what's one or two things that you think is significantly underappreciated for the magnitude of impact that it will have longer term, 5-10 years?
Yeah, everyone's talking about IoT, and there's a lot of noise around IoT, and in a lot of cases, IoT is pervasive, but in built environments, it certainly is not, and there's still a struggle of ROI versus cost, and the value, even the softer value that's being delivered. And with some of the things that we've been seeing with some of the technologies that we've been actively deploying in our buildings, I think IoT is going to absolutely explode. And that's, it already has in a bunch of places. So this is kind of a silly prediction. There's certainly precedent for it, but in the built environment, I believe that it will expand exponentially. And that's a huge opportunity, I would say, for real estate owner, managers, and developers. IoT, generally speaking, with all the solutions that it can bring, which of course comes with the requirement of connectivity and integration, like I talked about before. The other big ones that we've talked about for a long time that are certainly coming are things like autonomous vehicles. And I don't think that people quite grasp the way that 5G is going to change how things work, because I can already download Netflix movies pretty fast, but that's not what 5G is about. 5G is about, and this is a whole, forget webinar, conference in and of itself, will change the machine-to-machine communications that'll make a lot of things, autonomous vehicles, drone deliveries, things of that nature possible, which are going to significantly affect the way that we build our buildings, parking structures, delivery areas, these things of that nature. So I think that, in the next couple of years, maybe not so much, but to your point, or to Mr. Gates's point, in the next 10 years, I think we're going to see some massive, massive disruption and change in the built environments.
Interesting. Dave?
Just chime in real quick. I think from my end, another Bill Gates concept. I mean, that guy's pretty smart, as we all know. He got into the frictionless economy, and I think we're moving in that direction where we things will be there when you expect them to be there. And I don't know, my life in Toronto. If I go get a coffee, something's wrong with the Starbucks. And then I go and to the TTC, and I got, oh wait, my watch says, at least I know now, my watch says the train's going to be there in 18 minutes. And then the next one's 2 minutes after, the next one's 2 minutes after, and I'm like, oh great, right? And it just, I think the opportunity for us to create that economy where things are getting to where they need to be at the moment you need them is increasing. And I think from that standpoint, it goes from IoT to machine learning to predictive states, even prescriptive states, where when things are going to go wrong in the future, there's even a recipe for how to fix it. I think that economy sounds like a lot of fun, and if we can all get there by designing and building and operating things better, I think it's a good day.
So not to repeat anything David and Thano just said, because that's all absolutely accurate, but I agree the machine learning is going to be huge for us, I believe, in construction as managers. We're already seeing it in work that, and I hate saying this because artificial intelligence it's like one of those things that means different things to different people. And I think it gets used kind of interchangeably in a lot of different ways. But even with our own drone program and how we're able to track quantities and what's been installed versus what planned installation looked like. I mean, for us to be smarter and better aware of activity that's happening on site. I mean, I think this is going to change tremendously how we manage projects and what we're able to do with the amount of staff that we have on site. The other one for me as well is digital twins. For anybody who's been involved in BIM for the last 10 years, I think, maybe, when I talk about FM turnover models, at one point we were throwing out 6D FM and whatever, but, I think with IoT, the sensor technology, being able to leverage data from construction, we're going to be able to more smartly. I think everybody at the end of the day just wants to more smartly hand over information to our clients rather than handing everybody a bunch of banker boxes and saying, Thano, here you go, buddy, enjoy the building, and give you something that you can use and really, really experience that transitional to a sustainable occupancy for your projects, So I think that we've hoped to have that sooner, but I think that some of these other technologies are going to help us, and maybe the rebranding of digital twin will also help sort of progress that forward, and we'll see that in the next 10 years as well.
Outstanding. Well, it looks like we're coming up on time. I'd like to really thank each of you three for taking part in the session today, as well as our discussion where we kicked things off a little bit last week. I hope the next time we get together, we'll perhaps be in person at the event next year, as travel's all resuming, hopefully, for all of us and all of the audience coming in next year. CanBIM has a great lineup of further events I'd recommend everybody kind of check out and subscribe to those events. It's been a pleasure having the conversation today. I think we're going to move into a break now for the next 30 minutes before the final session. So thank you all again. Thank you to the organizers and for the audience for tuning in and giving us your ear for this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.